Recently I made an analysis video for Half-Life 2 mod, and in that video I said this: the combat does start feeling like the original F.E.A.R, although the maps aren't quite as good as F.E.A.R 1. Unfortunately, sticking as true as you can to Half-Life 2 sort of limits you to Half-Life 2's, well, mediocre map design. The enemy AI doesn't really have a whole lot more it can do other than run straight at you. The maps are pretty hallway-based shooting. Whereas in the original F.E.A.R, every single combat encounter had many different ways to approach, letting you outsmart the AI, or even the AI outsmarting you. Granted, F.E.A.R's AI is significantly better than Half-Life 2's, but still, AI is going to look smarter when you have better maps. Now, most people didn't disagree with this, but I got a few comments that seemed to miss the point I was making, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit. The comments that seemed to misunderstand what I was saying said something along the lines of, how could F.E.A.R have better map design? Everything looks the same. It's all the same offices, the same industrial complexes. Half-Life 2 is way more varied. What these people did is they confused aesthetics from map design. If you take Half-Life 2's maps or F.E.A.R's maps and strip away all the textures so that everything looks the same, that is the core map design. And this is very important. In Half-Life 2, the map design is very bare minimum and straightforward. AI really doesn't have much they can do but run straight at you, or hide behind the occasional dumpster. On the flip side, the original F.E.A.R's maps were designed in a very different way. The game is very linear, but every combat encounter had a map that was designed more like a multiplayer map. This map design is more open-ended and allows for a lot of different things. On each map, there's a squad that you can take out in any way you want to. You can flank them, you can run straight at them, you can do whatever you want. And within that chaos, the enemy can manage to flank you and even outsmart you. In all reality, it is artificial intelligence, but the map design allows them to move in a way that makes it feel like you're fighting another person. And it does this in a way that Half-Life 2 cannot do. Every combat encounter you get in the original F.E.A.R is going to play out in a different way. That same combat encounter is going to play out in a different way the next time you play it, and the aesthetic doesn't play any factor in this. To me, this is the most important part of a first-person shooter, the combat loop. This is what I think the entire game should be based around. Not the story, not the aesthetics, the pure combat. Again, F.E.A.R is a great example. The weapon sandbox has weapons that all feel different and distinct from one another, all having their separate purpose, and all feeling incredibly satisfying to use. Enemies have some of the best AI we've seen in first-person shooter history, still to this day, and the map design allows them to move in different ways that you wouldn't expect that will be different every time you play the game. This combat loop is why I keep coming back to playing F.E.A.R. But if that's so important, why is this video titled Analyzing Aesthetics? Well, because to a certain degree aesthetics do matter, but how much they matter is really subjective to the person. I'm very extreme on one side. I enjoy shooters so much that I just want the raw combat loop. Let's stick with F.E.A.R. The combat loop is so enjoyable to me that I can play it time and time again, even though the entire game takes place in industrial complexes and offices that all look mostly the same. And I have talked to many people that just never beat the game because it looks so similar. In my mind, I want to say they just don't understand the game, they don't get the point, and I want to discredit their opinion entirely. But the truth of the matter is they have a different way of looking at games. The aesthetics are important to them. Their rating system isn't going to look like mine, where I take the core combat loop, base everything on that, and then add points on top of it for looking graphically stunning or having good aesthetics or a good story. I'll never take points away for the game not looking good or having bad aesthetics unless it's buggy. I'll simply add points to them, whereas they will take points away and enjoy the game a lot less if the game looks rather samey all the way through. And that's why I got a lot of comments from people saying Half-Life 2's map design is better because they were purely looking at them from an aesthetic perspective. Half-Life 2 is undoubtedly a much more varied game when it comes to environments and atmosphere than the original F.E.A.R. But the map design is a lot more straightforward. They just weren't looking at the pure map design because in their mind it doesn't matter as much. Another really great example of this is Doom 3. I love Doom 3. I find it to be a great, fun game, but again, just like F.E.A.R, it looks the same all the way through. And perhaps F.E.A.R and Doom 3 are bad examples because they both are trying to go for this dark, bleak horror atmosphere. I feel like this atmosphere really kind of constricted them as to what they can do, so let's take a better example. Rainbow Six Vegas. This game is butt ugly. It's a butt ugly game that has a lot of bugs and can be rather janky at times, but for some reason it's just so damn good. Once again, it's because of the core combat loop. You have many different weapons to choose from, all feel very different and satisfying, so each time you come back to the game, you're thinking, man, I really want to use the FAMAS today, or man, I really want to use the XM8, and you can just swap out your loadouts. On top of this, the map design keeps you on your toes. There are many different ways for the enemies to come after you, and you can suddenly die at any given moment if you're not paying attention. This is why this game got so many good reviews and has fond memories all of these years later, despite the fact that it looks butt ugly, is rather glitchy, and has an awful story. Although let's be honest, the real attraction here is Terrorist Hunt. However, up until this point I've only talked about single player games, and I'm going to make the jump to multiplayer because this is when I believe things change pretty drastically. Battlefield 5 has been the head of many controversies since the original trailer, and some of them just leave me perplexed. Undoubtedly, Battlefield 5 is an absolutely terrible marketing campaign. Going back to the original trailer, it left most people baffled and, for some reason, angry. I didn't quite understand the anger of this trailer because my response to it, and what I think should be the more logical response, was, okay, that's weird. Can I see gameplay? A video game trailer doesn't tell you a whole lot about a video game. The gameplay is going to tell you everything you're going to need to know. Without seeing that, the outrage was rather unjustified. But this is in a day and age where everyone is getting angry at everything, and everything is apparently aimed at social justice warriors, so a logical conversation is kind of difficult to come across. Don't get me wrong, I'm not taking a hard stance for EA. EA messes up a lot. But at the same time, I don't want to take a hard stance on the complete opposite side where people irrationally hate Battlefield 5, everything about it, because of seeing one trailer or because there was a woman in it. There's a reason I left that rather long intro. You can see my sort of line of thought coming into Battlefield 5. To me, Battlefield 5 is a multiplayer game, and aesthetics in a multiplayer game, to me, mean even less. I play shooters for the combat loop, and the base combat loop is fun, addicting, and deep enough to keep a multiplayer game alive for years, then I'm going to love that game, no matter what it looks like. For Battlefield 5, I'm jumping into that game to figure out how can I use specific weapons the best, how can I outplay the enemy on the opposing team. All the World War II setting is just dressing on top of that, and to me, honestly, does not matter. The original introduction of women and all these cosmetics in Battlefield 5 was purely just to have more cosmetic options to get more people into their multiplayer game. It wasn't a political statement at first. It was turned into a political statement by everyone getting angry at the game. At this point, everyone wants to turn back at that one interview, you know, the one I'm talking about, where he called people uneducated. To play devil's advocate, put yourself in his shoes. He just spent the last few years working very hard on a game that's coming out, to have people not even look at the gameplay, and get angry and then call people social justice warriors and start this big controversy around the game, again, without even looking at the game. The proper response he should have had was to simply say nothing. Keep in mind, this is one person, a singular person in a company, and not everyone in that company is going to share that opinion. But unfortunately, if you're working for a company, you really shouldn't be saying these things because it ends up looking bad on everyone. Most people are not going to have the same sort of logical standpoint I have when it comes to this. Most people are just going to hate the company because of that one person saying something and then not buy the game. And again, most of the stuff he said wasn't really wrong. He was just angry and then took it a step forward and ended up calling everyone uneducated and saying things that he really shouldn't have. At the very least, if you're going to say something, you need to do it more professionally than that. But again, I can also understand where he's coming from. It has to be a very frustrating experience. But this leads back to the whole aesthetics thing. Should these things even be in Battlefield 5? I've already explained how I think about the game. I don't care in the least that they're there or if they're not. The World War II skin is just that, a skin on top of a fun multiplayer game. And I'm going to be looking at the video game, which is the most important part to me. Without that core combat loop being fun, I'm not going to stay around for years afterward because I enjoy the game. I still go back and play Battlefield 3 because the game is really fun. Regardless as to how it looks, if it looked terrible, I would still play it, just like Rainbow Six Vegas. But the perplexing thing to me is that people seem to really want atmosphere in a multiplayer game. And Battlefield is, by and large, a multiplayer game. Battlefield has had single-player campaigns tacked on every single time, but ever since Battlefield 3, let's be honest, they've been utter dog shit. Battlefield would be better off not even bothering with a single-player campaign. As much as some people don't want to hear that, they've not been very good and really should just be focusing on the multiplayer. On top of this, Battlefield 5 is more of an arcade shooter. The situation would be very different if, say, Red Orchestra 2 came out all these years earlier with a realistic single-player campaign and then added this stuff in. The controversy would make sense. That does not belong. But in a game like Battlefield 5, where you can get blown up by a rocket, then just stabbed with a needle and you're perfectly fine, this isn't what should be breaking your immersion. Nor should it really matter. You should be focusing on the game. And I think the problem I'm having here is that I'm looking at it from a quote-unquote hardcore gamer's train of thought instead of a casual gamer's train of thought. and there's going to be some push-pull and people are never going to agree. What I will say is that I did agree with the interview at one point where he said, if you don't like it, just don't buy it. There's no reason to flood the internet with a bunch of hate and frustration. If you dislike what EA is doing, just don't buy the game and show them with your wallet. EA is not going to care about controversy around their game, but they will care about less sales. And since I know someone's going to bring it up in the comments, yes, I do really like the combat loop in Battlefield 5. I find it to be some of the best gunplay we have seen in a Battlefield game since Battlefield 3. I think people's hatred of the game has really clouded their judgment on the game itself, as they already disliked it before they played it. It's almost the same situation with Halo 5, where people already disliked the game before they played it, and for a lot of the same reasons. Although a lot less social justice warrior stuff. Very much so aesthetic stuff though. I mean, how many conversations have you seen online from someone that hasn't even played Halo 5 that greatly dislikes Halo 5? And Battlefield 5 is the same thing. There may be some people that genuinely played the game and disliked it, but most people that dislike Battlefield 5 don't dislike it because they don't like the video game itself. I guess the main point of this video is that aesthetics are very subjective. Depending on the person you ask, you are going to get a wildly different response. I'm the extreme on one side that just wants raw gameplay, whereas you might get the extreme on the other side that cares 100% about the atmosphere of the game. The game could be awful, but if they like the atmosphere around it, they'll keep coming back to it because they just enjoy it that much. But I hope this has at least given some insight into how people think about games from the other side. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. If you really enjoy video games and want to hang out with me, I do a lot of stuff over on my Twitch, twitch.tv/Jarek4GamingDragon. Thank all of you regulars that show up to my Twitch. It's pretty awesome to get to hang out with you guys. It's a lot of fun just playing games over there. Thank all to my subs, thank all to my patrons over at patreon.com/Jarek4. Not subtle plug. You guys really help me a lot. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys over on my Twitch or the next video.